Hey, CM community. This is Joe McDonald, Chief Financial Officer. I want to thank you for taking the time to go through our boundaries training with Vector Solutions. We're really excited to bring this to you this year. We know that throughout the course of a school year, it can be very difficult to get together as a community. I know that professional development time is very sacred. There's not a lot of time to do that, so we try to do our best to really protect that and preserve it. That being said, we want to make sure that there are certain policies that from a compliance and from a school safety standpoint that we're trying to bring to life. We've got a really good handbook that's been examined and re-updated year over year for the past several years by our partners that I think gives a really good summary of the policies, procedures, and protocols that we use in certain key areas. But that being said, I think nothing can replace some real life human talk and delivery of some of those programs. I know that getting through those things sometimes can be difficult when you're trying to do it on your own. So our goal today is to take some of those policies, mostly the ones that center around boundaries, and deliver them to you in a way that brings it to life a little bit. And to do that, I've invited our general counsel, Drew Matskin. Drew has been with the school now for about 7 years, is a tremendous friend and tremendous professional, member over at Mintz Levin Employment and Labor Practice Law. It has a variety of different clients, from Fortune 500 companies to several independent schools, and just has a really great understanding of the world that we operate in. We know that obviously, given what we do as educators, there is a distinct responsibility we have to protect our kids. And there's probably no more solemn obligation we have than protecting our boys. And that's really why we decided to start with this policy. Over the course of the next 24 months, we're looking to possibly use Safe Schools or Vector Solutions to roll out more and more policy training. Some of it will be mandatory, like this one that we're in right now. And then some of it will just be either FYI or if you're interested in doing it. And we'll have some more updates and education on how to do that. But for now, what we're trying to do is take what we consider to be the single most important policy we have in that handbook and try to bring it to you today to bring it to life. So in a second, I'm going to turn it over to Drew, and we'll highlight this again at the end of the webinar. But essentially what we want to do is Drew's going to go through some of our policies, our supporting policies. He'll go through the remainder of the training that's provided by Vector, do the assessment. And then what I would encourage you all, and what I thought was a really great thing a couple of years ago when Drew's colleague, Natalie, came out to CMARC to deliver this presentation, was really all the interactivity and all of the different questions that we got, really the situation specific questions that we had. And what we want people to do as you're going through this is if you do have questions, send them to me, Jess, or Liz. And what we'll do is we'll sit down with Drew, we'll try to find some common threads, and then we will issue an FAQ so that way you have it. So that way we're making sure that not only are we talking things at a very macro or broad level, but we're also answering some specific questions because we know that was really important. So again, thank you for your time. And right now I'm going to turn it over to Drew for the rest of the presentation. Drew?
Great, thanks, Joe, and hello, everyone, and thanks again for participating in this training session. The Vector offerings really are excellent. It's a great service, and these modules really provide a great amount of information about what our obligations are under state and federal law. And I urge you to participate in them, to view them, and really to use them not only as a learning experience sort of in the moment, but then to apply what you learn as you're proceeding throughout your day, focusing on teaching and molding our boys here at the school. I like to get involved in these trainings because I find that there's always sort of this balance between what the law requires of us, which is what the Vector presentations are really great at showing you, and then sort of how we operate as a school consistent with what the law requires. And a lot of times how our policies and our expectations not just sort of comply with and meet what the law requires, but go above and beyond what the law requires, all in focus of our mission, right? Which is to really serve these boys the very best that we can. So one of the reasons why I like to do these intros and to join these seminars with Joe and with other schools is to, before you jump into that Vector offering, before you hear about the legal requirements, is just to learn a little bit more about us and who we are and what our policies and expectations are. Because again, not only is it consistent with the law, but oftentimes in light of our mission, in light of our values, it goes very much above and beyond what the law requires. So with that, I thought I'd just go over some of the policies that we have in our handbook that relate to the boundary trainings that you're going to be doing, talk a little bit about those. And then once we're done there, you can move into that boundary training. Again, getting ready to learn about those legal requirements, but now with some background about our own policies and expectations. So let's go to the next slide. Great. So our anchor for this, what really is guiding all of our expectations, all of our behaviors with respect to the students, is our handbook, right? We've invested a lot of time and resources in drafting that handbook a few years ago and continually updating that to ensure that it reflects our expectations and best practices with respect to how we interact with our student body. You've all received a copy of the handbook. If you haven't reviewed it already, we really do urge you to review the handbook and become familiar with its contents. One point that I'd note here as well, and I know that Joe and the team at CM agrees with me, it's not just to review it and become familiar with it, but it's also to ask any questions you may have about any policy that you find in the handbook. We have an open door policy when it comes to questions, comments, concerns. If you have any questions about a policy, how to understand it, how to apply it, talk to the right person at CM and they'll help you understand it. And it's going to make your life so much easier because it's not just going to be text on a page. It's going to be something you can actually live with and apply in a real world setting.
For sure. Reach out to us at any time.
Great. All right. Next slide, Joe. So again, what we want to do here sort of in this segment before we move into the vector training is to talk a little bit about policies and expectations that we have that relate to the boundaries training. So first and foremost, sort of this overarching theme, these overarching rules and expectations, it's really our code of ethics. It should be common sense. I think everybody really thinks this way, lives this way, operates this way in the school, but it merits repeating here. And we always like to start with this sort of overall statement. We're committed to student safety and well-being. We encourage healthy relationships of mutual respect and trust between students, faculty, and staff. We nurture an environment of mutual respect and tolerance. We absolutely prohibit any harassment, mistreatment, or harmful conduct towards anyone. So this is anyone on school property, right? At any school event, anytime you're on school time or interacting on behalf of the school with anyone, but very much specifically whenever it comes to faculty and staff interactions with students. It's like the overarching golden rule, right? We always want to act in a way that promotes the healthy relationship of respect and trust with our students. Moving on to the next relevant policy, sort of again, everything flows from this code of ethics. Cori and Sori checks, as you all know, we conduct these background checks on all of our faculty and staff. We want to make sure that everyone is fully licensed, accredited, and has passed their background checks to make sure that they are able to professionally interact and teach our students. Right? Then we move to our rules of conduct. We have specific rules of conduct to protect the safety of all employees and students. Under our rule of conduct policy, unacceptable conduct includes things like working under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs or controlled substances, abusing a student or endangering the safety of a student, inappropriate friendships, relationships, and socialization with a student, and violation of our school policies regarding sexual or other forms of harassment. Again, these all relate to the boundary training that you're going to be starting in a few minutes. A little bit different, right? Comes at it from a different angle, but it all goes to the same point of making sure that we establish and maintain that healthy relationship of respect and trust. Take something like that first bullet A, right? It may not directly mean that there's a boundary violation, but indirectly it easily could if you are under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs or controlled substances. So when we're thinking about boundaries, when we're thinking about those legal requirements, we're also thinking about these types of policies, our code of ethics, our background checks, our rules of conduct. Moving on to some additional policies. Joe, next slide. Discrimination and harassment. Again, this should be clear to everyone. Typically, it doesn't merit repeating, but we want to be absolutely clear on this point that we do not tolerate, we prohibit any form of unlawful discrimination or harassment of any kind whether on or off CM premises. Similarly, we prohibit any form of sexual harassment, which includes things like sexual advances, sexually related comments, jokes or gestures, pictures of a sexual nature, explicit voicemails or emails, downloaded material or websites, inquiries into sexual experiences, or discussions of sexual activities. Really want to make a point with this slide, and again, especially as we intro into boundaries training, that even conduct that you or that a faculty member may not think of as inappropriate, right? Your own perception of that or your own intent with respect to that conduct doesn't matter under our policy. It's the content of the conduct that's really important under our policy. And if that conduct is of a sexual nature, if those pictures or those jokes are of a sexual nature, it doesn't matter what the faculty or staff member's intent is. That's inappropriate, it's unlawful, and it's prohibited under our policy. Next slide. Couple points that I like to add whenever we go over handbooks, when we review our policies, again, as we think towards boundaries training, social networking, and generally health and safety. Social networking is so critical that we understand that now in today's day and age, where our interactions aren't just face-to-face anymore as they used to be, faculty and staff must always represent CM and themselves in a professional way online. Faculty and staff are prohibited from friending students on Facebook or other social media outside of our official email or social media platforms, software systems. And if faculty or staff becomes aware of abusive or unlawful behavior online, they have to report it. Again, as we think about boundaries, we want to start thinking about the types of relationships, the kind of conduct, the types of dynamic that can lead to potential issues with boundaries. And we're finding that communications via social networks are sort of a key thing that we come across sort of day in, day out when we work with schools. So you really want to be aware of what our policies are and what our prohibitions are with respect to the way that faculty and staff communicate with students in any way online. Moving to general health and safety, if there is any injury or illness that you become aware of with respect to a student, you have to immediately report it right away to the school nurse and our human resources department. We want that student to be sent to professional medical treatment right away. We don't want you as a faculty or staff member to feel that you're obligated, and you shouldn't make any assessment about the injury or illness that the student may have suffered. We want to get that professional in right away to make that assessment for us. Next slide, Joe. I want to talk a little bit about bullying. We've got a very clear and intricate policy on bullying, and it always merits repeating whenever we can. CM strictly prohibits bullying and cyberbullying in any form on school grounds, school activities, technology, or electronic devices. We educate on bullying in the following ways: student orientations, professional development with external resources, assemblies, workshops, trainings, and other activities, and issuing, distributing, and discussing our policies at the beginning of each school year and at regular times during the school year. We have a clear reporting obligation. If a faculty or staff member sees bullying or has bullying reported to them, they have to report it immediately to the principal. We also have very clear notification guidelines, including when we become aware of an incident of bullying, whether, when, how we provide notification to parents and guardians, whether, when, how we provide notification to another school, if a student at another school or a faculty or staff member at another school is involved, and whether, when, how we provide notice to law enforcement. So again, bullying is this critical component of our handbook, and it's a critical focus that we have when we think about overall, again, what our mission is, what our values are, what our goals here. It's educating these boys, it's molding these boys into adults, right? Any form of bullying based on that is strictly prohibited. And if you see it, we want to know about it as soon as possible so that we can address it. Next slide. Extra slide on bullying. Investigation. The principal or his designee will investigate promptly all reports of bullying, which can include interviews with students, staff, parents, and the aggressor. And then our response. We want to make it clear to you, and we do to all of our students, that we take all necessary steps to protect the health and well-being of any student subjected to bullying, ensuring accountability and teaching appropriate behavior. This includes things like skill building sessions, educational activities, academic and non-academic supports, parental support, behavioral plans, outside professional evaluations and support, and disciplinary action. And if you as a faculty or staff member are involved in or become aware of or can assist in any of these steps with respect to bullying, we're going to involve you as well. Again, it's a strict focus of ours as a school, and it should be of yours as a faculty and staff member. Next slide. Bullying, one more. The safety of the victim of bullying is paramount. Victims of bullying should be counseled with their safety in mind. And as you know, we conduct training on an annual basis, just as we're doing today for bullying. Staff members hired after the start of the school year are required to participate in training during the school year, unless they've participated in a comparable program in the last 2 years. And the goal of our training and professional development is to establish a common set of tools to promote safety, communication, and respect for differences, including how to prevent, identify, and respond to bullying.
And Drew, if I can just hop in, what I would say too with the training piece of this, training today will likely constitute the training that we're talking about in this, just so that there's no confusion. I know that from time to time we will have in-person training depending on the year, the cadence of the year. But two things. One is we're doing a pretty good comprehensive review of what the steps are in this procedure, or what the overall, and again, some of it is, this is just common sense of if you see something, say something. And then the administration will use its resources to investigate and get to the bottom and mitigate whatever is going on. But in terms of the actual training, that's essentially what we're doing here today. And we encourage folks that just, if you see anything, come to one of the administrators, start with the Principal O'Brien. He is the best resource, and he will, in his judgment, use his team or work with his team on moving forward with investigating any sort of issues. But essentially what we're doing is we're covering our policy today of how we approach this particular subject.
I think that's a great point, Joe. This idea of this training not being focused on, okay, when you leave, you should know the specific elements, of our code of ethics policy, or what bullying technically is, or what harassment or discrimination looks like. It's really that awareness and sensitivity focus, Joe. That's exactly right. Where if you see something, say something, your gut instinct, your common sense is going to tell you when something seems off. This is good background to have. It provides good context. It gives you additional information, and that's all helpful. But absolutely, you shouldn't get stuck in the details of this training. The fact remains that with this as background, as you're going through your day, if you see something that looks problematic with respect to faculty-student interactions, student-student interactions, you should notify the right resource at CM so that we can address it right away.
Always better to speak up.
Yep.
Absolutely. So now we're moving into our last slides before you start the actual training. And this is our policy on boundaries, which again, aligns not only with the legal requirements that apply to us, but goes above and beyond it to really focus on just how critical this is for us and how seriously we take it because of how it fits into what our goals are, what our mission is, what our values are in terms of what we want to do and how we want to treat our students. CM requires faculty and staff to conduct themselves in a manner that's above and beyond reproach with respect to students, and never violate the healthy distance that must always be maintained between adults and students. So just a couple examples here that we want to note. Field trips, for instance. Off-campus contact between faculty and staff and students always requires parental permission and the approval of the principal. Faculty and staff may never have students in their homes or vehicles. Our chaperone policy. Chaperones may not use or possess alcohol, marijuana, or other drugs, and may never be alone with a student, travel alone with a student, or be in a non-public space with a student, like a car or a hotel room. Internet use. Faculty and staff are only allowed to communicate with students through CM's system, software, and platforms. This relates to the social media and social networking policy that we have and that we talked about a few minutes ago. Faculty and staff may not communicate with students on social networking sites. Communication of a sexual nature is strictly prohibited and must always be professional and maintain appropriate boundaries. Again, intent doesn't matter. Whether you're trying to keep it light, make a joke, start off the week right, that content is what matters. And there should never be any content, any platform, through any method of communication that relates in any way to anything of a sexual nature. And interactions and communications. Faculty and staff are not permitted to meet privately with students. When contacting a student at home, faculty and staff must always attempt to speak with the student's parent.
Thank you, Drew, so much for taking us through that.
Thank you.
If I could just close with one comment before we head off into the rest of the training, it would be this. We noted, or I noted very early on in the training, is that our most solemn obligation is protecting our boys, and that is true, and that is really the intent of this webinar. What I would also say too is that top of mind for the administration is all of the people in our faculty and staff, and the incredibly difficult task that you have of establishing incredible relationships with our boys, which frankly, that's why boys come here. I know as an alumnus myself who came through the program, the relationships I had with my my teachers at that time, I didn't call them faculty. The teachers I had at that time left an indelible mark on me, and frankly changed the trajectory of my life, and is why I'm back here working at CM now. Times have changed, and the world is a very different place, and some ways it's a good thing, in some ways it's a bad thing. So the fine line between building relationships in intent, as Drew mentioned, in the right intent, and crossing a line that could be perceived as a bad thing is razor thin. So, really there are some very right answers to this, and there's some very wrong answers to this, but there is a whole lot of gray, and we understand that. So we encourage you all to please reach out with questions. If you would like to have a deeper dialogue about this, please let me know. We can talk about maybe having something a little bit more personal, whether it's breakout sessions or listening sessions or whatever it might be. But it's not lost on us how hard this is when you're trying to do all that you do in making this school the special school that it is. So I just wanted to leave everybody with that. Please, again, reach out with questions to myself, Liz, or Jess, and we will sit down with Drew and we can come up with an FAQ. But otherwise, I just want to thank you for taking the time to go through this. I know that it's a very, very busy time of the school year. And if you have any questions about the remaining of the training, please just reach out. Thank you so much. Take care.
Perfect. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.